natural. And if that's the way someone's going to go, they're on their way out that way anyway. And as you saw, the tube feeds and all those precautions long term don't make a difference. So pneumonia is the old man's friend. And it does demonstrate that love and affection of friends and family members. Once again, I keep going back to it, but I have to give the disclaimer. This is not for somebody who's chronically ill and not actively dying. That would be wrong to force an aspiration pneumonia on someone who's not at the end. That wouldn't be very nice. That might be euthanasia. In fact, you can bring me this when it's my time. I don't know if you can see that. I just love that. Wasn't that at Christ the King? Wasn't it? I believe it or not, I think this was at the Christ the King Retreat Center. I'm pretty sure that's that big hexagonal room or octagonal room down there.
Can you ethically do that though?
What?
Ask for that? Sure.
You can ask for anything you want. Oh yeah. When I was a resident, I digress for a moment. When I was a resident, I was at UCLA. And UCLA had no such thing as a non-teaching service. Cedars-Sinai, you had residents or you could not have the residents. UCLA, if you went there, you got residents. And they always used to give me the celebrities because I didn't know who they were and or didn't care. Like that dog, I have no idea what's going on. And they always put them on the 10th floor. 10th floor didn't have the best nurses, but they had the nicest nurses. And they had their own kitchen. And they'd bring them cocktails at 5 o'clock, and wine with dinner, and a little cordial at bedtime. And yes, we would hang out and hope somebody didn't take it. It was a lot. In fact, in the real old days, instead of sleeping pills when you were in the hospital, the order we would write, going back to the old Latin, we would actually write an order for spirits fermenti, 1.5 ounces at bedtime. And I would bring you that. And usually it was whatever the pharmacist had in there. Sometimes it was brandy, sometimes it was whiskey, whatever they had. Spirits fermenti. So what are the real recommendations? Diet as tolerated, meaning within reason. If someone's dying of a bowel cancer and has a bowel obstruction, you probably wouldn't want to feed them because it'll make the pain worse. It will hurt. So there's a situation as an example, we wouldn't want to, even if Grandpa really wants the ice cream, 20 minutes later he's going to be screaming a lot worse, so probably not a good idea. But you can use your judgment on this, and careful spoon feeding is not only okay, but it's a very tender, very loving, very wonderful way to interact with a dying relative or friend. And tube feeds can be okay, don't get the wrong idea, if there's no obstructions or disruptions of the gastrointestinal tract, if someone's not in the terminal phase of their illness. So you're not actively dying, you have the potential to live a while, it's not the very end. In some situations, of course, tube feeds can be appropriate. It's just we overutilize them at the end, is why I've had so much focus on that. And do remember that minimizing nutrition and hydration at the end, at the very end, actually improves comfort. It reduces suffering in a dying patient for those reasons we talked about. Not eating and not drinking is the natural way of dying. And that's the simplest way to look at it. So now we'll go right from dying to suffering. How's that? Bada bing, bada boom. So I love this one for suffering. This is probably my favorite slide of all time. As fellow Catholics, I figured you'd appreciate it. Yeah, can't you just picture one of the sisters in 8th grade saying this? So what about suffering? What is suffering? Suffering can be defined as an injury, this is the dictionary, an injury to the integrity of the person. Or as Cassell said, occurs when an impending destruction of the person is perceived. It doesn't even have to have happened yet. It's just you're perceiving that something awful is going to happen to you. So the dimensions of suffering, we tend to think of pain and bodily suffering. And once again, I can't emphasize enough, that's just the beginning of it. Really, the psychosocial aspects of suffering, the anxiety, the worry, the sadness, all of those surrounding death and dying are not only very real, but it's something we need to pay closer attention to and address directly. Denying, ignoring, or not talking about the psychological aspects, and the social aspects of suffering actually makes that suffering worse. So just to say, I don't want to talk about it, we shouldn't talk about it, we shouldn't bring it up, it might upset her, that's exactly the wrong thing to do. Unless, of course, there are some people, especially in the very elderly, based on the generational things I would argue, that say, I don't want to talk about it, talk to the hand. My father-in-law was like that. He was terminally ill and he didn't want to hear a word about it. Just didn't want to, and that's okay. If that's the case, you need to respect that. Just like you respect anybody's wishes within reason. So, what is the spirituality? As I mentioned, what's the family world? And what is their inner world really like? Are they at peace with how they've lived their life? Can you tell? Can you get an idea for that? The two biggest clues I've seen over the years in a dying patient on whether or not it ends up being really a good death and a peaceful death. Number one is, are they at peace with how they've lived? Not that they've never sinned, not that they didn't make mistakes, but overall, are they at peace with the life they've lived? And the second one, you guessed it, is how strong is their faith? People who've done a lot of bad things and have no faith tend to, in my experience, have very ugly deaths. Very ugly deaths. They kick and scream all the way to the curtain. And it's just the way it is, unfortunately. So the other thing, and think about this when we get into the assisted suicide section, but think about it now. Suffering is not without its grace. Suffering is not without value. Not that I wish suffering on anyone, but I'll tell you, when I see terminal patients getting near the end, nothing brings a family together like a terminally ill relative or loved one. You see more love shown, more selfless love, more sharing, more positive emotional connections when a family rallies together over a sick relative than you will see at any other time. That's worth something. That's worth a lot. And again, we get to assisted suicide, that's a big part of what you lose in a terminal illness when someone just says, I'm not going to wait to get to that point. You also lose the experience and the wisdom, especially with older people, that they can convey during their last hours, days, weeks, months, whatever it may be. And also, if you want to hear about Christ's selfless love, can you think of anything more selfless than caring for a terminally ill family member or friend? That is the definition of selfless love. And it not only helps that patient, it helps the caregiver immensely. Yeah, Frank.
Do physicians normally take into consideration the geography of, like say, you're on the West Coast, the closest relatives on the East Coast, do they advance their notification to accommodate that?
If they can, yes, absolutely. It's not always possible. And what's really the toughest situation, as you might guess, if there's kind of an all or nothing intervention that a dying patient really wouldn't want, but you know that's the only way that you're going to have time to get here from New York, that gets really tricky. And often you end up having to counsel that family member. We'll do the best we can. We could keep them going by doing this horribly invasive thing, but I don't think you really want us to do that just so you don't miss it. I mean, ideally, we'd like to get you there. Yes?
Being the one that is caring for the person, how do you advocate for what they want or what you think they would want?
You know, there's a number of different ways. Some of it can be hardwired, and that's the advanced directive part we're going to talk about in just a minute. And then the other part really is just how well you know them. And hopefully, having had many conversations with them as this process has unfolded. Now, if it's a sudden stroke, sudden car accident, something very sudden, the preset hardwired instructions are even more important because you may not have had those conversations. But all the more reason, the best time to have these conversations is when it's not an issue. You know, as morbid as it seems, next time you have a Thanksgiving dinner, after saying what you're thankful for, maybe tell your kids what you'd want or not want. You know, make it clear to them. Because I guarantee you, and we'll get to this in a minute, I guarantee you, your child, your sister, your brother, whoever it is that has the unfinished business with you, the one that you had the falling out with, that is who is going to insist that they flog you till Armageddon. Promise. Happens every time. Every time. It's always the daughter, the son, the brother, the sister who is estranged that pushes the rest of the family to literally, I would say, flog a dying patient out of their own guilt and their own inability to reconcile. It's unfortunately very, very common. I dread, Frank, answer your question, the family members in town usually get it. Not that everyone can't get it, but if there's someone that doesn't get it, it's almost invariably the family member from out of town. You know, they come in last second and they're still in such shock, they want to put pedal to the metal on the medical interventions as they try to get their arms around this. And often it's too late without making those medical interventions really harm the patient and make them suffer more. It's really a sad thing. It's really a sad thing. So suffering and healing, it really does go in a transition to wholeness. You have a symptom, what can you do for symptom relief? You have intrusive or bad thoughts, scary thoughts. How can you help to reframe those thoughts in a healthier way? You're feeling a certain way, a very dysfunctional way, or a very scary way, or a very fearful way. What can you do to transform those into more adaptive, if not healing, accepting thoughts? And these are things, these are processes we can go through. Whether we're perfectly healthy and we stubbed our toe, or whether we just got the bad news that we're going to be dying soon. And I'll tell you the other part that's really scary when you think about dying and how we do as physicians. This is one of my favorite studies. It was about 10,000 patients. It was done about 10 years ago. We looked at how accurate we are as physicians in predicting how long you're going to live when we give you the bad news. So, I give you the bad news, researcher takes me aside and says, okay, no kidding, no candy coating. How long do you really think Ken's going to live? So I tell them, and then they saw how long the patient actually lived. Our average error as physicians was 70%. Average, 70% off. And in that 70%, we guessed too long, which is what often catches people. Because we're humans, we're eternal optimists. So I tell you got a year, you probably got about 3.5, 4 months. I tell you got 3 months, you got about 3 weeks. You get the idea, speed it up, take that trip to Tahiti quick. Last minute vacations to go newsletter, I'll share a copy. We are really bad at that. We are really bad at that. That's the other reason with hospice, where I mentioned the 6 months to live form. Well, I always tell my residents, my med students, if you think someone will benefit from this, sign the doggone form. Because we usually guess wrong. We usually guess wrong, yes.
In the counting and the 70% and all that, do they think that part of the reason it's shorter than the guess you give them is because it gives them the reality check and okay and...
Well, that's why they interviewed the patient outside of the room with the patient. Or I interviewed the physician outside of the room. It's like all optimism candy coating away. You said, I think you can go a number of months, maybe a year or two. What do you really, really think? Closed door, quiet room with the doctor, alone, not with the patient. What do you really think? A year. So, no, I don't think that's it. I think it's our natural human optimism and thinking about all these treatments we can do to extend their life. To extend their life, yes.
She had her hand
Oh,
up.
go ahead.
I just was wondering, I'm a mortician's daughter, so I'm the one that you said that something's wrong with me because death doesn't scare me. Anyway, how often do doctors, or is it getting better and saying, this isn't really going to help? Why don't you allow the patient to die?
It is getting better. It's getting a lot better. But we are nowhere near where we need to be. And obviously, it's very what I would call user-dependent. There's more and more physicians than there used to be that are more comfortable with this and do an outstanding job, more than ever before. But there's still, unfortunately, too many of us out there that, you know, you're a 4.0 at Cal Berkeley in physics, you went to med school and you were an ace researcher in molecular biology, and now you're supposed to have a death and dying talk? It's like, that's so out of my comfort zone. So we are getting better at actively teaching medical students and residents in formal, systematic, hardwired ways how to approach this stuff. You had a quick question. I'm going to continue. We'll take the rest of the questions.
And
at the
mine's
end.
about
I'm not gonna get through it.
communication of families with the changing, like if you have a family member in the hospital.
Yeah.
And so the changing shifts that occur if they're in there for more than a 12-hour shift.
Oh, sure.
And so with our grandmother, we had made the decision for hospice, and that was in the works. And but the next nurse that came on duty literally gave her this dose of whatever it was, and she like went out. She didn't die right there, but we knew something happened. And so when we asked another nurse that was on duty with this woman, she took it upon herself to triple the dose of medicine.
Yeah, it's a little odd. I mean, obviously I was there and
Yeah,
can't answer that, but that does
yeah.
seem a little
So is there a way though that a family can communicate? How do you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just being on top of things, being an advocate, and talking to the staff and the physician, you know, as actively as you can. You know, be an active listener asking questions, not just a passive information taker. That's really.
But she said, okay, I'll talk with you later.
We can talk a little bit about that
Yeah,
afterwards. So this is my good death slide, and this is for you few younger people that are in here, right? Isn't that the truth now? Sad but true, sad but true. You had a pretty good life, but you were looking at your phone and you missed it. Oops. So dying well, and back to the, you know, physicians, especially those of us in the hospital or those that have a private practice that have the same patients and families for many years, or certainly hospice physicians. I really loved this quote. You know, the doctor was and is the familiar of death. When we call for a doctor, we're asking him to cure us and relieve our suffering. But if he cannot cure us, we're also asking him to witness our dying. He is the living intermediary between us and the multitudinous dead. He belongs to us, and he has belonged to them. And the hard but real comfort they offer through him is still that of fraternity. And I would take this and extend it not just to physicians, but nurses, family members, anyone, a social worker, any family member or friend that can help someone in the dying process. You know, we now have a program, it's called, I forget the name of it, it's literally called something like Never Die Alone or No One Dies Alone. Are you familiar with this? We can call from the hospital for someone who has no one to have a volunteer come and sit with them and hold their hand through their dying. No one should ever die alone. No one should ever die alone. And I always thought that was just beautiful. And again, I extend that way beyond physicians. So when you talk about the very end, it's dealing with that uncertainty, the fourth bullet, that often is the big trick. But of course, concerns about the family. Are you going to leave them well enough off? Are they going to get by? Do they have enough financial resources? Emotionally, are they stable enough? Does my daughter know how to keep a checkbook? All those practical things pop up too. And so coping resources really are very important after you get through the practical questions to then have to address the bigger issues yourself. And we have there's some interesting stuff with that too. And of course, I shouldn't go too fast. The strength of your faith, as I mentioned before and I'll mention again, is so absolutely critical. I had a dear friend who was passing away from an advanced lymphoma in his lungs that had been coming and going for years, and this was it. It's about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I went by his house to see him, and I won't name him because some people in this room may know this guy. And he asked how I was and how the family was and all this, and didn't really talk much about himself at all. And he was probably within a day or two of death, and I looked at him and I said, no. I said, how are you doing? And I felt so silly asking him that. Really hit me on how powerful an effect our faith has. When his answer was, he looked at me and he said, Brian, I have a very strong faith. I'm just fine. I'm just fine. It's like, wow, challenge card. Can we all do that, right? It's just absolutely phenomenal and really inspiring, really inspiring. So, in those areas, so what do atheists worry about? No, I'm just kidding. Optimizing certainly physical comfort, but not to the point of killing. Maintaining a sense of continuity with oneself and really trying to enhance those relationships at the end. and really make meaning out of the life you've lived. And then ultimately, if you can do that, I think you're better prepared, whether it's a family member, a friend, or you're the patient, to confront and prepare for that death with a sense of control, with a sense of some satisfaction, which really amounts to being at peace with what's about to happen. It's not all doom and gloom. Believe it or not, this was the brand of mosquito repellent they sold in South Africa. It didn't give me a lot of confidence. I didn't know it was doom for me because of the chemicals or for the mosquito, right? So the grief, of course, will come, and we have a whole other talk on that, but really the big things are you got to be on the lookout for people who stay withdrawn or become withdrawn and detached for extended periods of time. Certainly any talk about suicide or increase in substance abuse, all of those things become very important. And grief is not a set time frame. Again, I have a whole talk on this coming up, but it goes like ocean waves. It goes like a roller coaster, up and down and up and down. It's usually not steady, and it never really goes away completely. The pain lessens, and over time you learn to accept the loss, and you learn to be functional, and you learn to be happy, but you will still have triggers. If you're really close to someone, the anniversary, the birthday, Christmas, it's still going to be hard. That's human nature. Because the deeper you love them, the deeper you're going to feel it. So I always say, you will get better. You will not be the same. You will never be the same, and you know what? That's okay. Yes?
Oftentimes what I see when I'm helping a caregiver is that they're so busy taking care of the person that's dying that they're forgetting to take care of themselves.
Yes, no, that's absolutely
being
the
sick
case.
and being psychologically healthy.
No, that's exactly the case. In fact, after the death, the inevitable death finally occurs, one of the blessings with that is hopefully they can just get some sleep. So let's shift gears. We just have a little time left, and I don't want to miss out on this because it's such an important subject. Advanced directives. So we're going to talk about a typical advanced directive, living will, durable power healthcare. We're going to talk about very practical things, assisted suicide, and we're going to talk about the pulsed form as well. For those of you that are familiar with it, if you're not, you're going to be familiar with it. So this is my, you never know when death is coming, or when he may surprise you. I don't know if you can read that in the back. I just love this one. You just never know. I did make it the G-rated. I put the little thing on the end. I love the look on that woman's face. She has no idea death is coming through her door. Right? She's just fat and happy and having a great time with full-size Snickers, no less. Never mind, Margaret. We're good. So advanced directives. I like to say it's a good idea with bad planning. And this is coming not just from a Catholic deacon's perspective, from a practicing hospital-based physician perspective. I'd say it's completed by more than a few patients now, but still by not enough. Fewer patients bring their copy to the hospital with them. And the real problem with advanced directives, the typical, is it's really created for a lay person, a non-physician, non-nurse, who is trying to look for the reasonable wording. And that's why I have the infamous middle box here. The infamous middle box is why advanced directives often don't work the way you intend them to. At the top, it says, do everything. Check the box. At the bottom, it says, do nothing. I don't want anything done. You can check the box. The middle box, it sounds so reasonable. If my doctor determines that the benefits outweigh the risks, I want him to do it. And if the risks outweigh the benefits, I don't want him to do it. That sounds very reasonable to a non-medical person. So you check that box. You check that box, you're getting flogged. Guaranteed, or your money back. You will get the holy crap beat out of you if you check that middle box. Guaranteed, no doubt about it. Why? Part of the reason is a good reason. We always err on the side of life. We always err on the side of an intervention that may help. Here's the part you don't know if you're a non-medical person. First thing I teach my medical students, first day on the wards in the hospital, there is no such thing as 100% or 0% in medicine. In medicine, you can never say always, you can never say never. Doesn't exist. Anybody who says always or never in medicine, or 100% or 0%, is a liar or is a moron. One or the other. No in between. That's the only absolute I'll give you. So that being said, think back to the medical legal side. Unfortunately, it plays a role. Think back to, I don't know if you got a 5% chance or a 10% chance or a 30% chance, but you don't have a 0% chance. Guess I got to do all this stuff. You don't know the specifics. All we get is this general statement. Well, we could try this stuff. So in general, you check that middle box, even if your intention is not to have aggressive treatment, you will get aggressive treatment. Promise you. So, how do we make it work? Something you brought up earlier. Just be proactive. Discuss code status with a family member. Discuss with a close friend. At the time of admission to the hospital, ideally before that. What do you mean by your middle box? You're willing to be in the ICU on a ventilator for a week, a month, a day? Not at all? What are the details of how you really feel? If you're a healthy guy, even though you're 70 years old, maybe you do everything. If you're a 70-year-old with advanced emphysema, who's not actively dying, but you would never come off a ventilator if you went on one, and you know that, and your doctor has told you that, you better have some stuff in place to make sure your family isn't agonizing over literally pulling the plug, pulling the tube, when you knew you'd never come off. That all has to be proactive, as hard as it is. Another thing you can do is complete the POLST form. POLST we'll talk about is Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. It's not, a POLST form is now law in Nevada. It's available, you don't have to do it, and I'm going to give you some details on it. POLST forms are not meant to replace an advance directive. They are meant to explain the middle box. That's the way I look at it. They are to do exactly what I just said. They're going to make a layman's interpretation of a middle box something me as a physician, I can put into practical use and say, okay, she wants this, she doesn't want that. By the way, you can change your POLST every day if you wanted to. It's not set in stone forever. As your circumstances change, you can change the form. And I will go into that in some detail. So, patient wishes are open to interpretation. There's all kinds of different things. And withdrawal of life support is so much harder for a family than just choosing not to put someone on life support to begin with. Don't put your family through that. If you don't think you'd want to be put on machines, make that known ahead of time, not after the fact. And then again, withdrawing food and water and medication, that's hard on families, even with what we talked about earlier. And if we see something that's truly futile, we can do it as physicians, even if someone doesn't have a family member, but that's real hard to do too. Usually you have to have an ethics committee consult, and 2 different physicians on the case have to say this is futile. I mean, that's what we would do with a homeless person who had no family. Now, the worst thing, back to your out-of-town relative in New York, Frank. Doctor, the daughter from New York is here. I always want to go like this. Is she gone? Yes, the one with the unfinished baggage. The one with the unclosed business. The one that didn't get along with mom. Be careful not to make that person your durable power of healthcare. Hello? Often I see families, oh, well, my daughter here in town's here all the time and taking care of me. She's so involved, it might be difficult for her. I should make my out-of-town daughter, who's more removed from the situation, the durable power. Wrong answer. Wrong answer. Make the one who's there with you all the time. They will get it. They will go through the grieving process with you. They will go through the bargaining and the peace and the acceptance. They are the one you want. You don't want the son that won't talk to you in Minneapolis to be making your healthcare decisions. And believe me, as a physician, I thank you for that, because I don't want to deal with them either. So real quick, I'm going to go through assisted suicide for a moment or two, and then we'll go over POLST here. This is my general view of assisted suicide. If you want to know where I stand as a Catholic deacon and a Catholic physician, and this ought to actually help you with your understanding of pulse, because people get confused with that too, even within the medical community. There's some people within the Catholic Medical Association at a national level that really don't understand pulse. They put out a white paper that I have big problems with, I'll just tell you. And if you look at the details of their white paper, it's written by a lay theologian, not by a physician. He had a couple random family docs who I'm sure he browbeat sign on to it. But it's really a very naive, unrealistic, and I'll just say it, it's a wrong interpretation of what pulse is. And this does come up sometimes. So I will tell you as a disclaimer, that little white paper that came out, most physicians, even Catholic physicians and deacons, would not agree with their position. They are not big fans of pulse. But I'll tell you, this is the same group, this particular theologian, that's against living wills, durable powers, and advanced directives altogether. He doesn't think anybody should have any of that. That it should just be decided at the moment because circumstances change. That's a very naive interpretation I think most of you would get. Because at the moment, often the moment is too late, and we've already done everything to you. You're already in the ICU, you're already on the ventilator by the time your daughter even gets the phone call. So, something to think about. So, I will tell you, I am adamantly against assisted suicide, and just as adamantly for pulse. Right there, I'll show you, in my mind and heart, and spiritual, from a theological standpoint, they are very different things. Completely different. So assisted suicide, never okay under Catholic teaching. In a sense, you're asking a physician to play God's role. And some physicians like the promotion. I think it's a bad idea. I told you physicians are generally poor at predicting life expectancy. In medicine, I told you we never say always, we never say never. There are miracles. You know, it's the old hope for the best, plan for the worst. The miracle probably won't happen. Probably doesn't mean it won't. It means it's unlikely. It would be highly unlikely. It ignores all those things we talked about at the end of life. Bringing families together. The love, that strong bonding love that you always see at the end of an illness, at the end of a life, when families and friends come together. That has value. That has value to the family, to the friends, to the community, and to the patient themselves. It gives them closure. It gives the family a way to come together in love. And it ignores the value and dignity of human life. I will use the example, because it's public, of that Brandy girl in Oregon.
Yeah.
I was furious with that. She had what's called a glioblastoma multiforme, very bad brain tumor. The main treatment for that is radiation. The radiation to the brain for that tumor is essentially painless. It's not like she's getting a painful chemo regimen or anything like that. It's just radiation to the head. She won't even feel it. People go with good quality of lives, not always. People often, though, not rarely, often go 2, 4, 5, 6, 8 years with these brain tumors with radiation, and then eventually it stops working. But a radiation that's painless and gives them a great quality of life. So she gets diagnosed, says, I'm terminal and I don't want the side effects and I don't want this or that. The part they don't tell you in Oregon, she moves to Oregon after refusing a valid treatment that's essentially painless that would have given her years of good quality life. And we're supposed to feel sorry for her? I'm sorry, I'm going to speak ill of the dead. I would have called her major depression, put her on antidepressants, and forced the radiation on her as an incompetent patient.
Yeah.
I actually would have done that. Kid you not. There is another patient who was diagnosed, exact same tumor and grade of tumor as she had in the Carolinas. It's now 10 years ago. He was going to the Naval Academy. He's had the same radiation. He graduated from the Naval Academy. He served out his 4 or 6 or whatever years it is in the Navy. He's now in the seminary. He's now in the seminary to be a priest. He reached out to Brandy before she died. She ignored it. You can find this on the internet if you Google those stories. Forget his name, Father, I just call him Father Wonderful. He's not a father yet. But he reached out to say life is worth living. And in fact, they went to his bishop and said, are you going to accelerate his ordination because he has this disease? And the bishop said no, and he doesn't want me to. None of us know what God's plan is. If he's meant to be here at the end, he'll be here at the end. And if not, that's okay too, and we're both okay with that. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, very uplifting. So the other thing with this assisted suicide, natural conception and natural death. Back to your question about euthanasia. Intent is to kill. And we're so often wrong on life expectancy. The other slippery slope that I'm going to talk about a little bit here, and forgive me for getting into this, Belgium has an assisted suicide law almost identical to Oregon, so just that's the preface. There's an elderly couple in Belgium, this was last year. She was going blind, he was going deaf, they held each other's arm and they putzed to the store and putzed around. Other than the one's macular degeneration and the other's deafness, they were okay. But they talked about it, and they didn't want to be a burden to their adult children or grandchildren. They had some money put away, but it was getting to the point they were going to have to go into a senior housing, senior living arrangement. They wanted that money to be available to the family for inheritance. They didn't want to spend it on senior living. The idea of spending all that money, expensive, was very anxiety-producing for them. So they applied as a couple for the Belgian suicide law under anxiety and worry and fear and depression of not wanting to be a burden to their kids. And they were accepted. And their kids gave them their full blessing, I'm sure all the way to the bank. And this couple was allowed to kill themselves with the doctor's help. That's not a world I want to see. It's not a world I ever want to see. We're starting in Washington, D.C. I'm on multiple committees in D.C. where we no longer measure years of life. We measure years of productivity. You're no longer productive in a measurable GDP, gross domestic product way. You're no longer valuable. Where does assisted living start to go? Where does it go with Down syndrome? Where does it go with the physically or mentally disabled? It's a scary, scary, slippery slope. So let's contrast that with PULST. I don't want you to get the wrong idea of PULST. I testified actively for PULST to the state legislature. I was glad we got it passed. It's law in Nevada, you can do it. I actively testified against assisted suicide and will keep doing so. Again, they're two separate things. PULST is to tell me as a doc what your middle box means when you say if the risk outweighs the benefit outweighs the risk, do this, do that. It's not assisted suicide. Over 30 states have it now. What it is, it's a portable document that the ambulance has to pay attention to, the hospital has to pay attention to, the nursing home has to pay attention to. You can take it from one place to another, no more multiple forms. Again, it doesn't replace your advance directive. It's meant to be an explanation of your advance directive, of what that means to you. It's meant to be filled out with your doctor. Your doctor has to sign it. That's a good thing. So you can sit there and have a conversation. What does this mean? Explain this to me. And it's not meant to be set in stone. You're going to fill it out one way today, might say basically do everything. Next week, God forbid, you get diagnosed with small cell carcinoma of the lung. You know what? You should fill out a new one and change it to go with your changing circumstances. Because that was one of the criticisms. You don't always know how you're going to be 5 years from now. No, you don't. You should change it. And it's not meant for everyone. It's certainly meant for older people, especially those who, by statistics, would say you're going to live 5 years or less in all likelihood. Anybody who's chronically critically ill or chronically ill, or anybody who's getting older who just wants that level of explanation. And again, it's meant to be done with your doctor, and it's okay to change it. It's based on your values. It's based on your wishes, and it addresses all those different specifics. So it's very concise. Frail, elderly, those with serious, or anybody that wants one. Now let me give you an example of what I mean by it's specific. That middle box. It says on there, has a place to check the boxes, ventilator, no ventilator. You know, you might want a ventilator. Your 90-year-old mother who has emphysema, like I mentioned the example, would never come off the ventilator. I hope she checks no. Ahead of time and never changes it. That would be ugly for her and ugly for everyone. Antibiotics, take my mother's example. It says IV antibiotics, oral antibiotics, no antibiotics. If I'm dying and I have a month to go, I probably want no antibiotics. If my mom, oral antibiotics. Me, IV. It's got the specifics that we can interpret. It also has, which I really like, it has tube feeds, trial of tube feeds. In other words, a set period of time, doctor can try the tube feeds. If it's causing you more discomfort, take them away. Or no tube feeds. And again, this can be changed. It can be changed at any time as your circumstances change. And it travels with you to any setting. It goes to the office, and anywhere you present this, it's law. The doctors have to follow it. Yes?
Where do you get the form?
NevadaPulse.org or .com. I have it in here somewhere. It's one of the two. And I've got an example of it up here. And again, I'm running a little bit over, so I'm going to go real quick. But it's a simple two-sided form. The first side says you can have an intensive care admission, no intensive care admission. IV or no IV. IV nutrition, no IV nutrition. Lab work, no lab work. Dialysis, no dialysis. And you don't have to check every box. You can check as many or as little as you feel comfortable with while you talk with your doctor. It's not valid without a doctor or provider's signature, meaning they have to have that conversation with you.
Do they call it different things in different states?
Every state has its own kind, but the general format of it and the general questions are pretty close to identical. Some states get into a few more specifics than others, like Nevada's is a little bit more specific than Oregon, but that's okay. Yes?
Nevada's Department of Health, State Department of Health, you can go online to them
Yeah,
also.
and I have the Pulse organization website up here for you. And again, I have an example of the form here if anybody wants to look. So, as I mentioned, terminal illness, life expectancy, or even if you just want one. Oh, there it was. Sorry. NevadaPulse.org. NevadaPulse.org. And then, since we ran a little bit over, I apologize. I want to summarize this by saying, by the way, a lot of good questions. That's why we ran a little bit over. So thank you for making this interactive instead of didactic. Catholic social teaching allows for natural death. And as John Paul II said, artificially prolonging life is just as morally reprehensible as artificially taking it. Minimizing nutrition and hydration actually improves comfort and decreases suffering in terminal patients at the very end. And again, that quote, not eating and not drinking is a natural way of dying. Palliative care and hospice, as good as they are still underutilized. Pulse is available in Nevada, and assisted suicide, which is not pulsed, is never morally acceptable from a Catholic perspective. And I will say, in the interest of saving paper and our Holy Father's encyclical, if anyone wants a copy of the presentation, I will leave up a slide that has my email. All I ask is send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you the presentation if you want a copy of it digitally for yourself or for whoever, and I'm fine if you share it. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much. You know, we're moving past our denial, 'tis but a scratch. And I said, no worries, I've got your back on this one, right? My Ernest Hemingway photo. And thank you so much, and I'll be happy to hang around and answer any questions.